My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. And we're involved in a study of the resurrection of 1 Corinthians 15. We are examining the fact that the resurrection of 1 Corinthians 15 would be in fulfillment of God's Old Covenant promises made to Old Covenant Israel, found in the law of Moses. That is, found in the Tanakh, the Old Testament. We've examined Isaiah. We have examined Hosea. We are currently examining some of the correlations between Daniel chapter 12, which serves as a foundational Old Testament prophecy of the resurrection. Matter of fact, Brant Petrie is very clear in his book, Jesus, the End of Tribulation, and the End of Tribulation, in pointing out that the clearest Old Testament prophecy of the resurrection is Daniel chapter 12. And of that, there can be very little doubt. And so we're showing that here is this very clearest Old Testament prediction of the resurrection and showing how it correlates to the New Testament. One of the most powerful correlations is the direct parallels between Daniel chapter 12 and Revelation. And specifically, in last video, I shared the correlations between Daniel 12 and Revelation chapter 10 and 11. Well, watch this. Daniel chapter 12 foretold the resurrection at the time when the books would be opened and Daniel's people would be delivered. Now, in tomorrow's video, I'm going to share with you the absolute perfect correlation between the promise of the tribulation and the resurrection. Those are absolutely temporally linked. So you don't want to miss that, but I'll say that until tomorrow, okay? All right, now then, watch this. Daniel's prediction was those who were written in the books would be delivered. Daniel chapter 12, verse 2 is the time of the resurrection of the just and the unjust. Well, the resurrection of the just and the unjust is the time when those who are written in the books are delivered, right? Okay, so, and then Daniel chapter 12, verse 3 is the time when the righteous would shine forth in the kingdom. Well, guess what, folks? That's the new creation. And the resurrection of Daniel chapter 12, verse 4, or verse 2, would be at the time of the end. Now, it would be far off. Daniel was told twice, seal up this vision of the book, for it is far off. It is for the time of the end. Okay, what do we find in Revelation chapter 20? We have the time of the resurrection. Now, catch the power of this. This resurrection of Revelation 20, verse 10 and following, is at the end of the millennium. It's fascinating to me that so many people, it seems like a growing number of people, want to put the resurrection of Daniel chapter 12 in AD 70 at the beginning of the millennium. Well, in Revelation chapter 20, verse 1 and following, there is no judgment. There is no deliverance of those written in the books. You see, we don't find Daniel chapter 12 in Revelation 21 and following, except through the inception, the initiation of the promise. But the key thing that I want you to focus in on right now is that Revelation 20 is specifically the time of Daniel chapter 12, the time of the opening of the books. It is the time of the judgment of the dead. Oh, and of the just and of the unjust. And it is the time of the kingdom. It is the time of the new creation, in other words. When would that be? Well, it would be at the time of the judgment of the great harlot, Babylon. And I developed that in my book, Who is This Babylon? So if it is the case that the resurrection of Daniel chapter 12 is the resurrection of Revelation chapter 20, and if it is the case that the resurrection of Daniel chapter 12 would be fulfilled when the power of the holy people is completely shattered at the time of the deliverance of those written in the book, then it must be the case that the resurrection of Revelation chapter 20, the end of the millennium resurrection, was to occur when the power of the holy people is completely shattered. The power of the holy people was completely shattered in AD 70 at the end of Torah. Therefore, the resurrection of Revelation chapter 20 at the end of the millennium was in AD 70 when the power of the holy people was completely shattered. Folks, unless you can get two resurrections of the just and the unjust at the time of the end, perhaps two different kingdoms, two different rewardings of the prophets, two different openings of the book, then Daniel 12 is the end of the millennium resurrection, and that was to be when the power of the holy people was completely shattered. And yes, indeed, I do have an extensive discussion of these correlations and parallels in my book, The Resurrection of Daniel 12:2, Future or Fulfilled. Go to my website, BibleProphecy.com or DonKPreston.com, and order the book. I want to tell you, you'll be glad you did. You will be absolutely glad that you did. Now, don't forget, on tomorrow's video, I'm going to show you the parallel between Daniel chapter 12, the promise of the Great Tribulation, and the resurrection. And I'm going to begin to show you how both the Old Testament and the New Testament is absolutely, emphatically, and explicitly clear in connecting the Great Tribulation with the time of the resurrection. And thus, when we are told by former preterists, oh, well, Daniel chapter 12, verse 1 is the Great Tribulation in the time of Antiochus Epiphanes, which is simply not true. But Daniel chapter 12, verse 2 is the end of time. They are divorcing the motifs that the Bible absolutely, positively, and irrefutably join hand in glove. The Great Tribulation, the end of the Great Tribulation, was to be the time of the resurrection. And we will see you on the flip side.